The SWAT team was in the middle of breaching my front gate when I walked outside holding my building permits, trying to explain that the three men wearing black sleeveless tactical vests who claimed to be HOA enforcement had been living in my guest house for the past 2 weeks without my consent. The moment the SWAT commander assessed the scene, he immediately realized he had been dispatched to what appeared to be a fraudulent operation involving squatters impersonating officials and asserting authority over private property. My name is Frank. I'm a 51-year-old commercial real estate developer who recently purchased a 6-acre estate just outside Austin with the intention of renovating it and selling it. For the past 25 years, I've made my living buying, restoring, and reselling high-end properties all across Texas. This particular estate required extensive renovations, which is why I had contractors on site handling foundation repairs, replacing the roof, and performing interior remodeling when 3 men arrived 2 weeks earlier claiming to be HOA inspectors, and then simply never left. The SWAT commander, whose name tag read Commander Phillips, slowly lowered his weapon and approached me. Behind him, tactical officers were positioned strategically around my property, clearly uncertain as to why they had been called to what looked like a legitimate residential renovation project. "Sir," Phillips said, "we received a call reporting unauthorized construction and trespassing on HOA common property. Can you explain what's going on here?" I raised my building permits. I own this estate. I've been renovating it for over a month. The 3 men claiming to be HOA enforcement moved into my guest house 2 weeks ago without permission and have been attempting to shut down my renovation ever since. They are squatters using fake HOA authority as a cover. Phillips turned and looked toward the 3 men standing near the main house. The apparent leader, whose name tag read estate manager Donovan, held a clipboard and tried to project authority. The other 2, wearing tags labeled Officer Murray and Officer Clean, were openly recording the SWAT response on their phones. "Is this accurate?" Phillips asked them. "Are you currently living on this property?" Donovan stepped forward confidently. "Commander, we represent Westlake Estates HOA management. This property falls under our jurisdiction. This individual is conducting unauthorized construction that violates multiple codes and covenants. We contacted law enforcement because he refused to cease work despite receiving enforcement orders. We've been staying in the guest house to monitor the situation and prevent further violations. Show me documentation proving you represent a legitimate HOA," Phillips said. Donovan handed him a folder stuffed with official-looking paperwork. Phillips glanced through it briefly before passing it to me. "Mr. Frank, do these appear legitimate to you?" I reviewed the documents carefully. "No, these are elaborate forgeries. The county seal is incorrect. The notary stamps are digitally reproduced. And most importantly, this estate has never been part of any HOA. I confirmed that specifically before purchasing the property because I wanted full control over renovation decisions." Murray stepped forward aggressively. "That's a lie. We've been managing this estate for the Westlake HOA for 3 years. He bought the property fully aware it was subject to our covenants. Now he's doing unpermitted work and pretending we have no authority." I pulled out my phone and showed Phillips my property deed and title insurance paperwork. Here's the title: Clear Ownership. No HOA covenants, conditions, or restrictions. I purchased this estate 4 months ago. These 3 men appeared 2 weeks ago claiming to be inspectors, moved into my guest house the same day, and have been living there rent-free while attempting to extort money from me for fabricated violations. Phillips' expression hardened. "Let me clarify this. You 3 are currently living in his guest house. We are conducting extended monitoring for code compliance," Clean replied. "The HOA authorizes us to maintain a presence on properties with serious violations. HOAs do not authorize people to move into properties they don't own," Phillips said sharply. "That's called squatting. Sir, show me the guest house." I led Phillips and 2 tactical officers to the guest house. Inside, they discovered the men had established a full living arrangement: sleeping bags, personal belongings, food supplies, a portable generator, laptops, and stacks of fake HOA documentation covering multiple properties. They had completely moved in and made themselves comfortable on my estate. Phillips immediately radioed for additional units and detectives. "This is no longer an HOA enforcement matter. This is criminal trespass, fraud, and potentially more. Secure all three individuals. Donovan protested loudly. You're making a massive mistake. Commander, we have legal authority here. We represent the Westlake Estates HOA. This property owner is violating the law with unauthorized construction. Then you'll have no issue explaining that to detectives downtown, Phillips replied. At this moment, you are being detained for investigation of criminal trespass and fraud. All three men were separated and questioned. Their unmarked black Ram 2500 was searched, revealing additional forged HOA documents, laptop computers filled with fabricated county records, and a detailed database of high-end properties they were actively targeting. The guest house was secured as a crime scene, with officers cataloging every item the men had brought onto my property. Detective Warren from the Fraud Division arrived approximately 30 minutes later. She reviewed the evidence and Detective Warren interviewed everyone involved, and the story that emerged was far more calculated and brazen than I had initially understood. These three have been operating a sophisticated estate takeover scheme, Warren explained. They specifically target high-end properties undergoing renovation, pose as HOA enforcement, move onto the property under guise of monitoring authority, and then attempt to extort money, or in some cases, pursue adverse possession claims if the owner doesn't push back immediately. Adverse possession? I said, they've only been here 2 weeks. That takes years of continuous occupation. That's true, Warren replied, but most property owners don't know that. People panic when someone claims legal authority and starts living on their property. Many owners pay them just to make them leave, rather than deal with drawn-out legal proceedings. Some owners are absentee and don't even realize what's happening until the squatters have been there long enough to complicate removal. I thought back over the previous 2 weeks. Donovan and his associates had grown increasingly aggressive about shutting down my renovation. They confronted my contractors, demanded access to the main house for so-called inspections, and threatened legal action if I didn't pay $27,000 in alleged HOA fines and back assessments. I had been documenting everything and consulted with my attorney, but I hadn't fully grasped that they were actually living in my guest house as part of a larger strategy to potentially seize control of my estate. The identities of the three men were confirmed, and their histories were deeply troubling. Marcus Donovan had prior convictions for real estate fraud and forgery. Stephen Murray had a criminal record that included trespassing and identity theft. Robert Clean had previously served time for squatting operations and adverse possession fraud in California. Detective Warren discovered they had targeted at least 8 other estates around the Austin area within the past year. 3 property owners had paid them tens of thousands of dollars just to get them to leave. 2 other properties were locked in complicated legal disputes because the squatters had filed fake HOA claims and were asserting supposed monitoring rights. My case stood out because I caught them early and because they made the critical mistake of calling SWAT, which brought legitimate law enforcement to scene and exposed their entire operation. Calling SWAT was the dumbest thing they could have done, Warren said. They thought it would intimidate you into backing down. Instead, it brought Commander Phillips and a tactical team who immediately recognized the fraud. All 3 men were arrested and charged with criminal trespass, fraud, squatting, forgery, and conspiracy. The investigation widened to include every prior victim connected to their operation. Several property owners came forward with stories of paying large sums of money to remove squatters claiming HOA authority. Others were still battling in court to evict individuals who had moved onto their estates under the guise of enforcement rights. After the squatters were removed, I had to hire a restoration company to clean and repair the guest house. During their 2-week occupation, they caused approximately $8,000 in damage. My renovation timeline was pushed back by 3 weeks while investigators processed the scene and collected evidence from my property. The criminal trial took place 11 months later. I testified about how they had arrived claiming HOA authority, moved into my guest house without permission, and attempted to extort money while living on my estate. Other property owners shared nearly identical experiences. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of a systematic scheme designed to defraud estate owners through fake HOA enforcement and illegal occupation. All 3 defendants were convicted on multiple counts. Marcus Donovan was sentenced to 13 years in state prison. Stephen Murray received 11 years. Robert Clean was sentenced to 10 years. The judge ordered full restitution for all victims and specifically stated that targeting high-value estates through squatting schemes justified maximum sentences. You use planning and sophistication to steal from property owners, the judge said during sentencing. You created false authority, occupied properties without consent, and attempted to take what did not belong to you through fraud and deception. This court will not tolerate such brazen criminal conduct. Every property owner who had paid them received full restitution. I was compensated for the damage to my guest house, renovation delays, and the legal costs I incurred defending against their false claims. More importantly, 2 owners still entangled in legal disputes had the fraudulent HOA claims dismissed and the squatters permanently removed. Commander Phillips visited my estate after the trial concluded. The renovation was complete, and I was preparing to list the property for sale. "This place looks incredible," he said. "Hard to believe 3 criminals were living in your guest house trying to claim authority over it. The renovation would have been finished a month earlier if they had interfered," I replied. "But at least they're in prison now instead of targeting someone else's property. Calling you turned out to be the best thing they could have done for us." Phillips nodded. It exposed their entire operation. Squatters are usually much harder to remove because property law can get complicated. But when they called us claiming emergency HOA enforcement, they handed us everything we needed to investigate and prosecute. I sold the estate 3 months later at a significant profit. The new owners were particularly interested in the security upgrades I'd installed after the incident, including cameras covering every structure and direct alarm connections to local law enforcement. I continued developing high-end properties across Texas. Every time I begin a new renovation, I instruct my contractors to document anyone claiming HOA authority and to notify me immediately if anyone attempts to occupy any structure on the property. Those 3 men taught me how brazen property fraud can be and how criminals will fabricate authority to steal what doesn't belong to them. If anyone shows up at your property claiming HOA enforcement authority, especially if they attempt to move in or occupy any structure, contact law enforcement immediately. Legitimate HOA enforcement does not involve living on your property to monitor violations. That is squatting, regardless of the documents they present or the authority they claim. Document everything. Secure your property. Pursue criminal charges immediately. Squatters rely on confusion, intimidation, and hesitation. Do not wait. Act quickly. The longer they occupy your property, the more difficult removal becomes. Know your rights. Verify HOA claims through county records, and never allow anyone to reside on your property under the guise of enforcement authority. If you've dealt with squatters or property fraud, share your experience in the comments. Subscribe for more stories about protecting your property and standing up to criminals who believe they can steal through fake authority and illegal occupation.